Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to see you all. Welcome you to your new journey. I have heard Fred was terrifying this morning, so I'm going to try not to scare you. But we do have a lot to cover about the department. So the department, we work very, very closely with State Board of Accounts and the Auditor of State's office. What you will come to find out is most tasks that you have at some point will hit at least two of those three agencies, if not all three. So we do work very hard to make sure we have the complete picture from start to finish and kind of walking all the way through the process. The department's role, though, the main thing that you all will typically think of the department for is going to be your budgets. There are some other things that we also provide some assistance on, and we will get into that as we go through this presentation. All right, so in terms of agenda for today, what I'd like to cover would be talking a little bit about the department and our overall goals. We'll talk about on-time billing. Then we're going to go over some key deadlines, and these are more generalized in nature. So I won't want you to necessarily lock this in and say it's always that date, because things will change from year to year, especially with weekends and holidays are the main changes. I'll introduce you a little bit more to our particular department and the way that we're structured. And then I know you have a long SBOA Gateway session coming up after this, so I'll also do a little bit of an introduction to the department's side of Gateway. So with that, in terms of the department, we have a few different goals. And when you correspond with us, you typically will see this down at the bottom of our signature lines. So first and foremost, we want to make sure that we're putting the taxpayer first. What exactly does that mean for us? When we are looking at putting the taxpayer first, we want to ensure that we have fair and equitable assessments, which I know you all are not the county assessors, but we do work very, very closely with the county assessors. So we want fair and equitable assessments. We also want to make sure that from a taxation standpoint, everybody is levying only what they are statutorily allowed to impose in terms of property taxes. So that's where more of our budget process comes into play. And then just generally speaking, making sure that we have accurate implementation of the various statutes. One thing you will come to find out is that there are more statutes than I can count that will ultimately control various aspects of your positions. We all of the agencies that you will work with, we all try very hard to make sure that you know which different statutes they are and kind of how those are interpreted and how to actually apply those in your day-to-day role. Secondly, for the department, something that is very core to our process is respecting local control. And for the department, there are certain obligations that we have. Ultimately, we are a regulatory agency. And you will see as we talk through the structure and what we do, you'll see at various points in time where the department does have to fulfill that regulatory aspect. But when we are going about those decisions, we very much focus on what has occurred locally, what decisions have been made locally. And so long as those decisions are within the allowable statutes, or are allowable within the statutes, we definitely try to respect what those decisions have been. As an example of this, just to kind of give you an example, when we will ultimately oversee and approve your budget. So for each of your different funds, we will review your adopted budget, and we will provide for each fund, we will certify a budget number, so your spending authority for that budget year. We also will certify your property tax levy and your tax rate, if that's applicable for that particular fund. We will do all of that at the fund level. Where we typically will not get involved is going in and saying, within this $1 million that you want to spend within this particular fund, we think this is an okay appropriation, but that one's not. There are a couple of very specific situations where we would do something like that or we would be involved in that way. But generally speaking, we will stay more at that 30,000 foot fund level and allow you all to make those decisions locally in terms of how that money should actually be spent. To us, that's a policy call, and we are not in your county day to day, and you all are going to know the needs of your community better than we would. So we do, as much as possible, try to respect local control while still ensuring that we're meeting our statutory obligations. The other big overarching goal that you will see from the department, and it's an ongoing conversation that you will hear from us, has to do with on-time taxation or on-time billing. This has been particularly important over the last several years. To give you an example, earlier in the 2000s, say around the 2007 timeframe, 2008 property tax crisis that we had, a lot of counties fell behind in their taxation, their property taxation. Not necessarily because of anything occurring at the county. There were just a lot of moving parts going on at that particular point in time. So for many, many years, what you heard from the department was we're driving towards on-time billing. And finally, in 2014, we did have all 92 counties billed on time. And by on time, what that means would be that your first installment occurred for May 10th. There was a May 10th due date. So 2014 was the first time recently that we have had that. That was the first time, I believe, in 13 years that we had all 92 counties billing on time. So we have made a lot of progress on this. We've been able to maintain that stat for the last couple of years, both 2015, 2016. We've had all 92 counties doing on-time billing. So it is definitely something that we are wanting to ensure continues. What that means for you all would be, in most cases, what we have experienced in the last couple of years. In most cases, as we go through this process, you all do your process of calculating tax bills, and everything's running smoothly. If we hear from you, however, that there's a glitch, you're probably going to talk to us a little bit more, just because we do want to make sure that every county has the best success or best opportunity possible to be successful at billing on time. So in that type of situation, we will talk to you a lot more, see if there are things that we can offer to assist you. And really, this happens maybe once a year at most, maybe one county a year. Some counties, or some years, we don't have this at all. But on-time billing just is something that is incredibly important to the department. This next slide will help to understand, hopefully help to shed light as to why. And I know you can't necessarily read all of these little steps along the way, but this is the way we look at on-time billing. It is very much a relay race between the department, local units, the Auditor of State's office as well. So we have all sorts of different agencies and individuals that are involved in this process. And so just to kind of walk you through this a little bit, let's see, I'm trying to think. So we are, the DLGF, we're going to be in green on here. Your county assessor is going to be in blue. So where we start here with this blue individual is your county assessor computing the initial gross assessed values. What happens then is that they will send those to the department and we will review that. That's what we call reviewing the ratio study. Essentially what we are looking to do in that process and what the county assessor has already done in that process of preparing their ratio study is something that we will call trending, where we want to ensure that the assessed values that we are applying to properties are essentially keeping pace with what's going on in your actual marketplace. So on an annual basis, your county assessor will prepare a ratio study that compares assessed values to what the actual sales prices were, and then the ratio study goes through various statistical analysis to come up with factors that can be applied to make sure that your assessments are trending along with what's going on in your marketplace. So the county assessor will prepare it, then it will come to the department for review and approval. That then goes back to your county assessor, and at this point then, they're going to hand it off to you all in red. So for your purposes, your county assessor will, what we call, roll your assessed values over to the county auditor's office. So this is when they transfer the gross assessed values that they have computed and get it into your software system. Along with that, there's something else that we call balance, so it's roll and balance. And the balancing process is basically just running some checks to make sure that all of the data has transferred over correctly, and that there aren't any major issues with that data transfer. So this then is where you come in terms of the assessments and the initial assessment or the initial taxation process itself. So for the county auditor, what your role will be once you've received those gross assessed values, you will then go through and apply all of the applicable deductions and exemptions. And that will lead towards something that we call the Certified Net Assessed Values, or CNAV for short, CNAV. Your Certified Net Assessed Values are going to be the values that we actually use when we compute your budget order. So those are going to be the assessed values that we are computing your tax rates from. So it's a very important part of the process, and it also helps to get the ball rolling on the next part of the process, which is the budget process. So while this is the actual, more of the property taxation process, at the same time that this is going on, there's a budget process going on. And that budget process is occurring within each individual taxing unit. So your county unit, as well as all of your cities or towns within your county, your school corporations, libraries, townships, all of those different entities are going through their budget process at the same time that these steps are going on. So what the department will ultimately do is we will take the budgets that are adopted at the local level from all of those individual taxing units. We'll take the net assessed values that you as auditors have provided to us, and then we will run that through our budget review process. And that's actually where we are currently. That's kind of, if you're thinking of where are we today, we right now are in the budget review process. Locals had a November 1st deadline for budget adoption, and so now the department has until February 15th to complete our budget review and provide each county back with what we call a budget order. And that budget order is where we will provide that budget, property tax levy, and property tax rate for each fund of the units. As we do that, so there's a step in here between the green and the yellow that this is something that's called the 1782 notice process, and I will talk a little bit more about this as well. The 1782 process is our opportunity to tell you, here's what we anticipate approving for your particular unit, and then you as a local unit, you have 10 days to review that and respond back to us. So within my slides, I know I don't have handouts, but what we will do is we will post this presentation up to our webpage. At the back end of this particular presentation, one thing I do have is what I call bonus material, and it's talking about the 1782 notice. The reason why this is going to be particularly important is that many of you will receive this during your first month in office, and when you receive it, then you'll have your 10 days to review and respond to it. So if we don't get to the bonus material today, we do have some slides on it. It kind of points you to what this all means, what should you be looking at, what type of changes you might want to request. So that certainly will be a helpful guide.
You say this is going to be on your website?
Yes, we will post this up to our webpage, and it will include all the, the bonus material. Okay. All All right, so after the 10 days, and we've heard back from all of the taxing units within your county, that's when then we'll move into our budget order process. We'll ultimately certify a budget order. Within that budget order, as I said, are the tax rates. These are the rates then that you will take, put into your software system, and use to compute your actual tax bills. So that's you and the county treasurer, kind of that last person there, computing the tax bills, running the tax bills, mailing them out, and ensuring that we have met that on-time property taxation. So as we look at this, there are all sorts of parts where the department is involved, and that involves different divisions within the department, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. All right. So as you're looking at this concept of on-time billing, some resources for you. I've tried to point you to some different resources. On an annual basis, we will release what we call our calendars. We typically have, actually now at this point we have 4 calendars. I forgot to include one up here. But our assessment division will release a calendar that gives all of the key deadlines for that next year for the county assessor. Our budget division will release a similar type of calendar. Our data division, who is involved in reviewing various data sets that you'll be required to provide back to us, they will provide a data calendar. And then we actually have a 4th one that we just added this past year, which is a gateway calendar, which shows you the various dates by which you need to submit reports to the department through Gateway. So those will all come out right around the end of this year, or the first week of January is typically when those will come out. Once we have released those, sometimes we will have to go back and update them. Typically the budget calendar is the main one that ends up having to be updated based on whatever the General Assembly has decided to do during the legislative session. So this year we have a long legislative session, so there's a possibility that you could see an updated budget calendar in May or June of this coming year, depending on what happens with the General Assembly. I've got the link here in terms of where you can actually find these calendars once we have released them. Another option that we will talk about is our DLGF listservs. And I will provide that email address for you of how to get onto our DLGF listservs. Highly recommend it. It's probably the main thing we are complimented on a regular basis. All right, other important resources for you will be status maps. We have, I think my next slide, this is what we call our status map, or one of our different status maps. This one is particular to budget certification. And so it kind of shows you where each county stands in the process based on the different color coding. In this case, what we have, really counties are in one of 2 states right now. If they are this blue color, then they are actually in budget review currently, meaning our budget field representatives are working through all of the budgets submitted within that county. And if it's still in red, that means you're on deck for budget review. We haven't gotten to you just yet, but sometime within the next month and a half, we will be getting to all of these different counties. But this particular status map will actually track all the way from the assessor's process all the way up to on-time billing. So even if you ever have questions about, hey, what's my assessor doing? Have we submitted certain things? This status map is always a good resource for you. Jump back real quick. The other resource I have here is what we call our 1782 status. When we enter into budget review time, we will actually change our home page, so our in.gov/DLGF, and the bottom half of our home page then becomes a tracking tool for whether or not your 1782 notices have been sent out. Those will ultimately be sent out via email, and so sometimes it's good to double check that and see, hey, have these gone out? Since you only have 10 calendar days to respond, every so often we do run into a situation where they hit somebody's junk mail, or they didn't check their email within those 10 days, and then unfortunately by the time they're trying to respond, it's already past their deadline for response. So we will have our 1782 status up there, shows you when they were mailed out as well as when they are due. And at this point in time, we have not actually released any 1782s, so none of you are, that should show everybody has not received them. All right, want to just walk through some key deadlines that you'll have as you go through this process. And this would be kind of my disclaimer on this would be that these are the general deadlines. In all situations, refer more to the actual calendars that we release than this particular presentation. While a lot of these deadlines will stay the same, if a date falls on a Saturday or a Sunday, then we end up having to shift it around a little bit. So while I've put in the general statutory deadline here, it's possible in any given year that it could be on a different day. All right, so on this, I've tried to include certain things that also are with SBOA, certain things with Auditor of State's office, and then a lot of DLGF. So one of the first deadlines that you'll have through State Board of Accounts will be what we call the 100R, or it's your employee compensation report, and then followed shortly thereafter with your AFR, or your annual financial report. I know you're going to be hearing a lot more about those, so I won't spend too much time on those. Actually, I won't spend any time on those. At the same time, for the department, you do have an annual debt reporting requirement. And so this is a situation where we have something we call debt management on our Gateway tool. And when you issue any new debt, if you take out a new bond, you have a statutory obligation to report that to us within 30 days. So that's the process for entering in a new debt. On an annual basis, then, we ask each taxing unit to go back in, review what is currently in debt management, and essentially affirm that that is an accurate picture of what debt you currently have outstanding. So for most units, assuming that they've kept up to date on entering data in, this particular March 1st deadline is pretty easy. You go in, double check, yep, those are the bonds I have outstanding. There haven't been any changes to them. I affirm that this is correct, and you sign off on it and submit it. All right, so I kind of mentioned that just so we don't lose track of that, because I know you will be focusing a lot on your annual financial report. Uh-huh. Yeah.
I just want to ask if that calendar days or work days?
For the 1782 notice, it is calendar days. The one exception to that will be that we typically will not end your 1782 notice period on a weekend. So in some instances, you may get an extra day or two, depending on how the dates are falling. When we get a lot closer to our February 15th deadline for certification, I can't promise that, but generally speaking, we try to avoid having anything due on a weekend. All right, so while you are going through the month of March, then, you will work with the Auditor of State's office on preparing your abstract and getting that approved, which will ultimately help to set you up for this May 10th on-time billing, so your first installment due date. Next, then, we have something that actually is going to be a change this coming year. And this is what I talked about with the assessor rolling the values over to you. Historically, that has occurred or was statutorily required to occur July 1st. Starting in 2017, those dates are actually changing, so this will be new to everyone. So now the assessor is supposed to roll real property values on June 1st and personal property values on June 15th. So we are already talking within our staff about how we're going to make sure we keep that communication going and try to keep as many counties on track. This was a statutory change from a few years ago, and one of the benefits of this for you all will be that it should allow you extra time to complete your process of what you need to do before you can certify your net assessed values. So that's kind of the goal of moving up their deadline. All right. In the month of June, then, you've got June 30th, which will be your spring settlement. That's something you'll work on with the Auditor of State's office, but actually taking your property tax dollars and distributing those out to your taxing units. Next, then, we'll jump to August 1st, which is that deadline for the certification of net assessed values. If you are a county that has any tax increment finance districts, which at this point almost all counties have, there is a process that you'll go through before you certify your net assessed values, something we call the TIF neutralization process. And we typically release more information on that in the May-June timeframe. So we'll provide that to you with the form that you're supposed to fill out, and we'll also have contact information on it, so you'll have a resource at the department you can communicate with as you're looking to do that neutralization. August 1st is also our deadline for reestablishing cumulative funds. So cumulative funds, these are going to be funds that are rate controlled or controlled by a maximum rate rather than controlled by a maximum property tax levy. What will occur with your cumulative funds is that there is a process that we go through on an annual basis that adjusts your maximum rate based on what is happening within your assessed values. So especially if you are in a situation where your county has seen growing assessed values, your maximum rate that's going to be allowable on your cumulative funds will start to decrease. The concept being, if you have more AV, you need a lower rate to achieve the same dollar amount. But there is a process in place then also for you to come back and reestablish that fund. And by reestablishing that fund, you raise that tax rate back up to, you can go all the way up to what the official statutory maximum is. So again, this is a process we will release more information on in the springtime. There is a whole hearing process that you have to go through locally, so you certainly can't wait until August 1st to decide that you want to do this. Really, if you probably need to have it started by July 1st at the absolute latest, but we typically encourage units to start it as soon as possible. Every so often we'll have a unit who goes through the process, say in March or April. There ended up being a procedural issue with it. They still have the opportunity to go back and redo it and get it to apply for the next year. If you wait until July to take action, you will not have that same opportunity. All right. This slide then, we're going to jump into more of the budget process. So with the budget process, since you all will be working very closely with your county council, one of the activities that your county council has to do at their first meeting in August is to do what we call non-binding review. This is where your county council will have the opportunity to review the potential property tax levies and tax rates from all of the different taxing units or local governments within your county. They have the ability then to also issue recommendations. These are non-binding recommendations, and so you will hear a lot of hatred for this process. Not going to sit there and lie about that one. But it is a process that is required per statute, and so we certainly will be working with you as auditors to make sure that that process is occurring locally. The next bullet point here then pertains to your actual budget. So in order to adopt your budget, you will have to have a public hearing, and prior to that public hearing, you will have to post what we call the notice to taxpayers. It's also called the Form 3, which is just what we refer to it on as on Gateway. It's Gateway Form 3. That will have to be submitted on Gateway at least 10 days prior to your public hearing. What will happen when you submit that within Gateway is that it will instantly become available on a web page that we have that's called budgetnotices.in.gov. That web page allows anyone at any point in time to go out and pull all of these notices of the public hearing. So you can search for your county, and it will pull up the whole list so you can see when are all of the other units within your county taking action. And once you submit, your information will be available there as well. I'll skip this middle bullet point for a second. Generally speaking, in terms of the public hearing, in order to stay fully on track, The last date for that public hearing is normally right around October 20th to 22nd. Again, it all kind of depends on the weekends. But you will have, in order for you to meet the November 1st budget adoption deadline, there has to be 10 days between your budget adoption or your public hearing and your budget adoption. So kind of starting from November 1st and working backwards, that gets you to a public hearing deadline of roughly October 20th. The middle bullet point then here, also on October 20th, is what we call the excess levy appeal. So you all will have what we call a maximum levy, and that is per a statutory formula. And just because I know the question will come up, these maximum levies, they were originally established back in the 70s. There have been all sorts of adjustments to the calculation over time. But a lot of times if you are looking at why is my maximum levy this and why is that county's maximum levy that higher number, a lot of it could actually go all the way back to the 1970s and 1980s and what was transpiring back then. So sometimes you're going to ask us that question and we're not going to be able to fully explain it because I was not at the department in the 1970s. So that's just kind of for your maximum levy. You do, though, on an annual basis, have the opportunity to do certain excess levy appeals. And this is your opportunity to come in and say, something has changed within my unit. We need more property taxation, or we need the ability to levy more. For a county unit, there are not as many options as there are for, say, cities and towns. But one that we will see a few different times for county units would be an extension of services. So if the services that you are providing to your citizens has changed, that may be a situation where you might qualify for an excess levy appeal. Again, I make no promises here today that you would get this approved, but that is one that we will see. Also for county units, there's one that we call the 3-year growth. So if you have seen decent assessed value growth within your county, that may be something that you would end up qualifying for. And all of these are controlled by different statutes. Again, there's a process that you go through where you'll complete a form that the department will release, submit that to us, and then we will review that and ultimately issue our decision as to whether or not we would grant that appeal. Those forms, typically we will release those June, July timeframe. So if you do think that some of those might be an option, I would definitely keep an eye out for those forms. All right, then the last deadlines I have on here, November 10th, which would be your second installment due date. Now for 2017, I want to specifically highlight that we actually have released guidance that November 13th is going to be the deadline. Per the federal government, November 10th in 2017 is the observed day for Veterans Day. And so it is officially a federal holiday. And based on the way the statutes are, the due date is not supposed to occur on a holiday, so the department has released guidance that the due date would be November 13th. We are hearing from some counties that they may have already set their holiday schedule to actually stay open on the 10th, thinking that that would have been the due date. And so if you are in that situation, please reach out to us and we'll walk you through kind of what needs to occur. But officially the department is saying November 13th is the due date for 2017. And this is something I definitely will talk to the treasurers about in a few minutes. December 30th, then we have one other appeal, which is called a shortfall appeal. This would be a situation where if you had significant errors or refunds that had impacted how much you were able to actually collect in property taxes, that would be your shortfall appeal, and you do have an extended deadline on that one. And then lastly, we have winter settlement of December 31st that you'll work with Auditor of State's office on. All right, so very quickly, we're going to jump into the department's structure so you kind of have the lay of the land of who to contact for what. So we are broken into 5 different divisions. assessment, budget, data, legal, and communications. So first we'll talk through our assessment division, since they are kind of the start of that relay race. Our assessment division, we are tasked with providing guidance on how to actually assess properties. Essentially in statute, they say the definition of true tax value of a property is whatever the department says that it is. So we have all sorts of rules that we adopt to assist county assessors in determining how to actually assess properties. As I mentioned, our assessment division will review the ratio studies. It's kind of where we do that comparison between sales price and assessed values. We also are responsible for assessing what we call state distributable properties, or basically public utilities and railroads. This is a process where you will interact with our assessment division, because once we have actually completed those assessments, we will provide you with that information so you can upload that into your local system and ensure that that gets captured within your assessed values. We do have an assessment certification program that we administer. Your county assessors all have different requirements in terms of level of certification. And then we also are involved in the reassessment process. So we are in the process of our first cyclical reassessment. We used to do general reassessment, which was once every 5 or 10 years, depending on how recent we're talking. But we recently switched over to cyclical reassessment. So the county assessors are actually working on finishing the 3rd phase of the first cyclical reassessment, and each phase accounts for 25% of your county. All right, then our budget division. So I've already talked a little bit about our budget division, but our budget division, we will review all of the proposed budgets, rates, and levies for almost 2,500 different taxing units or local governments. This is where we will enforce the statutory maximums. As I mentioned, we have our budget calendar that we'll release, try to keep everybody on track. One of the other times that you'll have the opportunity to interact much more closely with our budget division is what we call our budget workshops. Those will typically occur in July and August, where your budget field representative, so you will each have a specific budget field representative assigned to your county. That field representative will come to your county for a certain number of days, and they will meet one-on-one with each unit. So you, as the county unit, you are provided that opportunity to meet directly with your budget field rep. They can assist you with any budget questions you have. They can help you fill out the forms. There's all sorts of things that they can assist you with. So I highly recommend you take this opportunity to meet with your budget team. I also have down here the link then of where you can actually find out who your budget field rep is. It includes also their email address and their cell phone numbers. Those are state-provided cell phone numbers, and that essentially is their office phone number, so do not ever hesitate to call them on that. If they are out of the office, they will actually have those powered down typically.
I have a question. I probably shouldn't ask it during your assessment division.
It's okay.
Information. But what about financial institution tax? How, do you guys have anything to do with that?
We no longer have anything to do with that. In terms of calculating the distributions that come back out to the units, that's actually done through the Auditor of State's office.
You guys are no longer involved in that?
Correct. We will factor it in during our budget review, but we're not involved in the calculations. All right, budget division, working on our budget review. As I said, we're currently doing this. We'll send out our 1782s. These will be released via email. So this is something that when you do take office, you're going to want to double check. We'll get you all set up with a gateway login. You're going to want to double check your 1782 notice recipients, which will be within the gateway system. It's one of our form options. And make sure that you are included on that, as well as anyone else that needs to see this preliminary budget order number. We highly recommend having more than one individual receive this. That way you can all kind of keep everybody on track, make sure you respond in your 10 days. And then that leads into our final budget order. When we release the budget order, we also will release some data files that can be imported into your property taxation system. So we try to help avoid you needing to hand key everything in. So we will provide those to you, and I know your software vendors will be able to provide you with more information about how to actually get those into your systems. Our budget division, if we get into the budget year and you realize, hey, we got some extra revenue here and we need to spend it, that's what we would call an additional appropriation. So our budget division is involved in that process. Dan Jones is our assistant budget director, and he really oversees that whole process. We do release guidance on how to go about the process, but Dan is always available to answer questions. And then likewise, any new requests, any excess levy requests, cumulative fund requests, those also get worked through the budget division. Some other calculations that the budget division is involved in, I won't spend too much time on these. We have various calculations pertaining to local income taxes. So one of them will be the first one. If you are in a county that is what we call levy freeze, there are only 11 of those counties out there, so more likely than not, you're not in one of those. But if you are, you will be hearing from us in the March-April timeframe with some additional information. And then just to stick with local income taxes, the last 2 bullet points will release information about unit level distributions in August and October. And starting just this year, there's a whole number of additional reports that we started to release in July to provide you with some estimates prior to you starting your budget process. All right. Data division. You will interact with our data division in a few different ways. One will be that you do have various files that will come out of your tax billing system that you're required to provide to us, and they will do what we call a data compliance review. We also conduct software certification, so for your tax and billing system, they actually have to be certified through us. So if you have questions on your program, you can always reach out to James. He's our go-to guy. Legal division, our legal division is kind of involved in everything. Obviously interpreting statutes, providing all sorts of guidance and memos. They also are our public information office if you ever need anything. Mike Duffy specifically is our general counsel. He is going to be your go-to expert on deductions or exemptions questions. He is our resident expert. I also have dropped in here links to his most recent deduction presentation, as well as a presentation by one of our assessment field representatives on tax abatements, something else that you may end up needing to know. And then communications, pretty obvious what they do, but really it's just one person. Jenny is our communications director. She maintains all of our web pages, as well as our listserv. And this is where I'm going to plug our listserv. I have down here her contact information. I highly recommend that you shoot her an email. She's already fully expecting to receive some this afternoon. Shoot her an email and tell her that you'd like to get on the county auditor's listserv. Through the listserv is where we will release all of our different memos. We also have a weekly email that we release typically on Mondays that includes the next 4 or 5 key deadlines you need to be aware of. It also includes some information about status of the different counties. So it's really just a good ongoing check of, hey, are we where we need to be? So I definitely recommend being on the listserv. If for some reason you're not on the listserv or you received something and then you can't find it in your emails, we also do post all of our memos and presentations up to our webpage as well. We have a page that specifically is called Memos and Presentations. Gateway, I won't get into this since I am running long, but we are involved in the Gateway process. I know you're about to see more of Gateway from the SBOA side. For the department's purposes, you can actually contact either agency and you'll get your login credentials, but if you are wanting to contact the department, we have our gateway at dlgf.in.gov that goes to our Gateway support team. They can help make sure that you are all set up. Likewise, if you have any interest in knowing who within your county has access into the department's side of Gateway, they can help you with that, especially if you need to modify any of those permissions. You'll want to work with our Gateway support team. Just highlighting some other resources we have, all sorts of user guides and tutorials. And with that, this is my contact information. You can always reach out to me, but also through our Contact Us. In total, we have about 40 people, and so depending on what you're looking for, the Contact Us will help you kind of hone in on the right person to contact. With that, I will wrap it up and move it on out.